Republican presidential candidate Dr. Ben Carson. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
Let's get right at it. This is politics.
Okay.
What's your take on Hillary's the email server going to the FBI?
Well, I'm glad it's actually getting there, but here's the big issue. She was Secretary of State, a very responsible position, and that she does not have the judgment to know that having an outside server might put at risk information that jeopardizes the United States of America. And now you're going to turn the keys of the whole country over to someone with that lack of judgment? People say to me, well, you've never been elected to anything. She was a United States Senator. She's a Secretary of State. Obviously, public service doesn't necessarily confer wisdom or judgment.
You say she does not have the judgment to sit in the Oval Office?
Based on this, absolutely.
Tell me about your tax plan, because you've talked about tithing. Tithing, to me, is a flat tax. 10% from whatever you make, 10% goes to the government.
Well, is
this a flat tax plan?
It's a proportional tax. That's what tithing is. You make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion. You make $10, you pay $1. Of course, I would get rid of all the deductions and all of the loopholes. But here's the key. People, they look at the guy who put in $1 billion. They say, he's still got $9 billion left.
Exactly.
That's not fair.
Right.
We need to take more of his money. That's called socialism. And what made America to a great nation was we had a very different attitude. We would say, he just put in $1 billion. Let's create an environment that's even better for him so that next year he can make $20 billion and put in $2 billion. That's how we went from nowhere to the pinnacle of the world in record time. And it's growth. It's not taking what's there and dividing it up and making it smaller.
Have you decided on 10% as a kind of tithe flat tax rate?
Well, in terms of remaining revenue neutral, it would have to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. Early on, probably higher. Over the course of time, lower.
A tithe is voluntary. Taxes are not.
Well, it's a model that I'm looking at, the proportionality model. What could be fairer than that? God didn't say if your crops fail, you don't owe me anything, and if you have a bumper crop, you owe me triple tithes, which is the way that we think.
Christianity is at the absolute dead center of your campaign. It's the center of your life, isn't it?
Well, let me put it this way. My beliefs certainly inform the way that I do things. When I look at the Bible and from the beginning to the end, there is a lot in there about our responsibility to others, our responsibility to the poor. So even though the left would look at what I'm saying and they say, oh, he hates poor people, he's only for rich people, when you actually stop and listen to what I'm saying, you will recognize that when we go in and we put reading rooms into areas, particularly Title I schools where kids come from homes with no books, they go to a school with no library, a poorly funded library, and these reading rooms change the trajectory of their lives. That's what's good. It's not patting people on the head and handing them stuff. We've been doing that since the 60s. And where has it gotten us? Nowhere. We've spent over $19 trillion eradicating poverty. Has it worked? We have 10 times more people on food stamps, more poverty, incarceration, crime, broken families, out of wedlock births. Everything that was supposed to get better is not only worse, it's much worse. So if you're intelligent, you say, this is not working. Let's look at some things that do work. And what we do know that works is when people take an interest in other people and they invest in them and personal relationships develop. That's what brings people out of poverty.
You're very soft-spoken. I'm not going to say you're laid back because you're clearly passionate about what you're talking about,
Sure.
But you are soft-spoken. You are like this as opposed to like this.
Yeah, and some people
you can't
think,
change yourself, can you?
Some people think that denotes weakness. But I would simply tell them, go back and look at my life and look at the things that have been overcome and look at the problems that have been solved and tell me, is that real weakness?
Good question. I know your life story. I've known you for many, many years. I do want to run a quick soundbite from the debate.
Okay.
Because I think you used humor as a way of breaking through. And you did break through in that debate. Just let me run a quick clip of the very funny Dr. Carson. Roll tape.
I haven't said anything about me being the only one to do anything, so let me try that. I'm the only one to separate Siamese twins. The only one to operate on babies while they were still in the mother's womb. The only one to take out half of a brain, although you would think if you go to Washington that someone had beat me to it.
That was good, sir. That was good. Did you practice it?
No, I didn't.
I think a lot of the candidates had one-liners, which they had in their back pocket and played the card whenever they could. Was that your back pocket card?
No, I didn't know what my final statement was going to be, but I was sitting there thinking, I said, Lord, I need a good statement. And I started listening to everybody, and everybody was saying, I'm the only one to do this. I said, there you go.
It worked. It really did work. Can I have your fast reaction to some of the issues of the day? The Iran nuke deal.
I think it was a terrible deal. It doesn't have all the things that a good negotiation would have. Accountability,
if you were
verification,
can you
enforcement.
Just sweep the pen and say, we abrogate this, we're not taking part in this, it's gone? Can you do that?
With some appropriate preliminaries, absolutely. There's no reason that you're tied to that.
Obamacare.
I want to see people have very good care, and I have proposed a different system which actually will give people much better care for less money, and in 80% of cases take the middleman out of the way.
Okay. Are you raising a lot of money? Because you were one of the breakthrough candidates in the election.
Well, in the last 3 days, we've had 17,000 contributions, and in the last 10 days, $2 million.
Is that the basis of your campaign? Individual, relatively small contributions?
Absolutely, it is. Because that's why I'm not going after the billionaires and licking their boots, and I'm not going after the special interest groups. And I never will. I will never sell myself to those people. I only want to be beholden to the American people.
Last one. It says in the Bible that we should be stewards of the planet, stewards of God's
like you?
gift to us.
Like Stuart Varney?
No, steward with a D on the end. Nice one, sir. I really like that, actually. That was very, very good. What do you make of us being stewards of the earth? That's our biblical responsibility.
I totally agree with that. And that's why I say, for instance, to the green movement, I say, of course we have a responsibility to take care of our environment. Of course we have a responsibility to give it to the people coming behind us in better condition. So whether the earth is getting colder or warmer, it doesn't matter. We have to be intelligent in the way that we do things, but that doesn't mean we use that to do inappropriate things. The Environmental Protection Agency, as far as I'm concerned, should be used to work with business, industry, academia to find the cleanest, most environmentally friendly ways to utilize our energy rather than suppress it, particularly at a time when we're having economic problems. And we also have a responsibility not to spend the money of the next generation. Thomas Jefferson said it's immoral to pass debt on. If we could bring him back today, he would immediately stroke out.
Sir, it was a pleasure having you on the program.
Always a pleasure.
I do remember right after you spoke at the presidential prayer breakfast where you sort of chastised the president publicly. The next day you were on this program and I said, why don't you run for the presidency? And you wouldn't have anything to do with it. You wouldn't answer the question, but you did today. Dr. Ben Carson, thank you, sir.